What up? And welcome to another episode of From the Script to the Screen, My Hero Edition. Been a couple weeks, but part 2 of season 7 is out now. So, as always, gotta shout out the studio, Bones, and gotta give a shout out to the creator, Horikoshi, who officially said that the manga is coming to an end. About 5 chapters left, coming out in August. So, big shout out to Kohei Horikoshi. Now, episode 10 of season 7 kicked off new opener and new ending, officially starting the second occurrence. Now, if you guys remember, going off of the last episode, the kids stepped in against Endeavor and Hawk's fight against All For One. They covered chapters 355 to just about 360, leaving out a special scene at the end, which I'm assuming is because they wanted to save some excitement for next week. But for this week, we see that the heroes still have to deal with All For One. And so, even though the kids did get injured, they're still able to stay in the fight. We know that the kids have a personal vendetta with All For One because he's been targeting Deku this whole time. And so, we know the goal of the heroes is to try to break his mask, which they feel like is his life system and helps him greatly when it comes to life support. So after a couple attacks, they're finally able to get it done. You see Endeavor come back after having a tough conversation with himself. We know that he's been on a path of atonement, and here he kind of see him break it down, and it's something that I feel like comes into play with what Shigaraki said at the end of the episode. It all comes full circle. But this hero society that the adults came up with could shape the way you see heroes in different ways. So we see Shigaraki mention things like resentment and misunderstandings. And so we see that that's the outcome for Shigaraki. But at the same time, even though Endeavor's a hero, his resentment for All Might and just not feeling like he was adequate enough to be the top hero built a resentment for himself. So you see that when he has this conversation, he feels like even though he knows that he's been trash and that he's trying to repent, the fact that he is trash has always motivated him. And so we know at this point the fate of the country is at their hands, and so he decides to rise up. Gotta give a shout out to Endeavor. Definitely my favorite panel of the week. Because like I mentioned, the heroes have taken a couple casualties during this fight, and Endeavor specifically has taken big injuries, and he's always able to push through. Reminded me a little bit of Black Clover. We see Endeavor form a flame hand and go extra crazy on All For One, but unfortunately we know that he always has a trump card. And so even though throughout the episode we see that his body is rejecting him in a way, and they definitely were able to affect him a little bit, we see that they show us a picture of Eerie, and we see that he starts to regenerate. So even though he doesn't have super regeneration necessarily, something is going on where he's able to resurrect himself. So we'll have to wait and see what finally happens with that. But it's not looking good for the heroes since they've already pushed themselves just to get him to where he's at now. So pretty sure they're already exhausted, and having to fight him again won't be something they're looking forward to. And speaking of his body rejecting him, we know that's because, shifting to Shigaraki, he now has all of All For One's quirks, the most important ones and the originals. We saw All For One mention that he has copies, and we see that that's also debilitating him a little bit. But I already mentioned Shigaraki's speech, but we just have to talk about him in general and just how much of a problem he's becoming. Like I said, has all the important quirks, so he's strong, quick, and can regenerate. And so now even his body has taken on a sort of evolution, and we see that he's able to extend his appendages, his original quirk, to an unlimited amount. So that's what the heroes are dealing with. And even though it appears that Bakugo is able to do damage to him on a large scale, we see that it doesn't necessarily get the job done because they need more of a punch. And so Bakugo is another person that takes a pretty big injury, and we see that one of his devices that he uses to make the clusters break and Shigaraki also appears to break his arm. So he's definitely out of commission for a little bit, but obviously they're still gonna have to push through. There's also other heroes there, so they're gonna have to try to come together. At the end, we see a funny little scene with the business class of My Hero Academia, but they're the people that are recording this information, best way to put it. But we could leave it at that. See what happens next week with the kids. Deku's on his way, trying to get there in time. Again, this whole plan was supposed to be centered around him, with everybody else supporting the fight. So see how long it takes him to actually get there. But let me know what you guys thought about the episode. Glad that My Hero's back. Till next time, peace.